Are you buying this? Most of the left wing right now is pretending there's a halo over every Democratic politician while digging up all the personal dirt possible on Pete Hegseth in a bid to throw a wrench in his confirmation proceedings. But Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin went straight into the hornet's nest and pushed back against Caitlin Collins' half-truths in a way I've seldom seen. Take a look for yourself before we dive in.
Our Republican source was in the room there today. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee, Republican Senator from Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin. Those were the Democrats we heard from. Of course, Republicans had their fair share of questions. But on this news tonight that Senator Ernst says she is a yes. We had not heard that from her yet. What's your reaction to that?
Well, she did her due diligence. She said from the beginning she was going to give Pete a fair chance. Pete did exactly what he said he was going to do. He was going to take the fight to the members, not let the media figure this out themselves. And he went from meeting to meeting with one member at a time, explaining the situation, facing the tough questions. And then today, he handled himself with dignity and class. He took the oncoming fire. He was composed, and he handled himself with a great compassion for the job. And I think at the end of the day, Joni was like, that's what I was looking for right there. And she waited till she saw what she needed to see and committed to voting for him.
Do you think her saying yes virtually assures that he will get confirmed?
Yes. She, I know there was a couple other Republicans that was looking at the way she was going to go, that they were going to follow her lead. I think with her saying absolutely yes, she's going to support him now, all but confirms his ability to be the next Secretary of Defense.
Now, maybe there's two things you should parse out here first. While there certainly are allegations of alcoholism or infidelity flying around in the media against Pete Hegseth, that's dirty laundry that should at least take a backseat in a Senate hearing behind more important questions like qualifications and knowledge of the Defense Department. And I think that's exactly the thing that Caitlin just fails to understand every single time, because that's not the same thing as defending the nominee. It's about putting into context the difference between personal shortcomings and professional competence. And you can be sure that the Defense Department right now needs the most competence that it can get at a volatile global time like this, as this is a time the US needs to show strength in Eastern Europe and the Middle East to finally end those wars. And when it comes to the question of personal failings of senators, Markwayne Mullin had a rather interesting way to put it.
So we heard from Senator Gary Peters there of Michigan today on whether or not he's qualified for the job. Not just the allegations against him, but whether or not he himself has the qualifications for this. You seemed incensed by that when it was your turn to ask questions. I want to just play a bit of what you said when you had the microphone.
I'm just looking for qualifications. You didn't give me any qualifications. Starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have.
I mean, first off, that's a pretty serious accusation there. Do you want to name any of the senators that you're saying are drinking on the job?
No, and that's my whole point is that these senators on the other side of the aisle was trying to act like they had more morals than Pete Hegseth, and they don't. If you're going to hold someone accountable for their behavior, then hold everybody accountable. I'm not saying I'm the most moral man or the perfect individual. I'm absolutely not. I wasn't the one calling him out. But if you're going to hold someone at that standard, then hold everybody at that standard. And it's a complete hypocrisy what they were showing when they were talking about his affairs. There's multiple members of Congress that's had affairs on their wives, and that they haven't called to be stepped down. They haven't called them to step down either. And then when it talks about qualifications, what is the qualification to be the Secretary of Defense? The only qualification is you got to be a United States citizen. That's it. Other than that, it is the president's choice, and the Senate has the right to advise and consent. And he meets the qualifications to be the next Secretary of Defense.
But of course, Pete Hegseth brings more to the table than just being a U.S. citizen, and you saw that this week when he was finally confirmed and took his oath with Vice President J.D. Vance. Because here's where I think part of what Donald Trump thought's process was when nominating him to the role. It's that the Defense Department right now, it needs someone that has actually risen up the ranks and come up after having fought on the ground as an infantryman in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And what's interesting is that Senator Joni Ernst finally threw her weight behind Pete Hegseth despite the tough questioning. Says a lot about what she believes is heavier on the scale of accountability. She wrote in a statement last week that was very interestingly worded, saying in part, quote, "After 4 years of weakness in the White House, Americans deserve a strong Secretary of Defense. As I serve on the Armed Service Committee, I will work with Pete to create the most lethal fighting force and hold him to his commitments of auditing the Pentagon, ensuring opportunity for women in combat while maintaining high standards and selecting a senior official to address and prevent assault in the ranks." Those last two sentences are important because they're an answer to two of the most incessant media attacks that Pete Hegseth has been facing ever since he was named by Donald Trump as the nominee back in November. Here's how he pushed back against it during the hearing itself.
A small handful of anonymous sources were allowed to drive a smear campaign, an agenda about me, because our left-wing media in America today, sadly, doesn't care about the truth. All they were out to do, Mr. Chairman, was to destroy me. And why do they want to destroy me? Because I'm a change agent and a threat to them, because Donald Trump was willing to choose me, to empower me, to bring the Defense Department back to what it really should be, which is warfighting. So I'm willing to endure these attacks. But what I will do is stand up for the truth and for my reputation. False attacks, anonymous attacks, repeated ad nauseum, printed as nauseum, as facts. We have provided to the committee, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're going to share, on the record statement after on the record statement from people who have served with me, worked with me at Fox News, Concerned Vets, Vets for Freedom, you name it, from the top of the chain to the bottom, who will say I treat them with respect, with kindness, with dignity. That's men, that's women, that's black, that's white, that's every background. I have prided myself as a leader of respecting people, being professional. That is the balance of mine. I'm not a perfect person, as has been acknowledged. Saved by the grace of God, by Jesus and Jenny.
That's a welcome admission and much more than what you can expect from most politicians, but the broader question is, and it regards anyone, not just Pete Hegseth, if there's someone with personal shortcomings in their marital life or struggles with addiction, what does the redemption arc look like? Or should there even be one to begin with? Well, America answered that question in this election with Donald Trump, despite the many personal failings of Trump that you can list out to your heart's content. The real question must always revolve around who's the most competent to get the job done, and on that, there's a clever way that Caitlin Collins tried to corner Senator Mark Wayne, but it backfired quickly.
I just want people to listen to how you've questioned candidates before.
I'm just looking for qualifications. You didn't give me any qualifications. You gave me your history, your story. But what makes you qualified to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force?
Now, that was for Melissa Dalton. She had 20 years in defense, not very much in the Air Force, I believe. And you had really aggressive questions for her in that hearing. So it's not like it's unusual for someone to question someone's qualifications and whether or not they should have a job. I mean, being a sitting senator is one thing and obviously an esteemed position, but also to run the Pentagon, you're in charge of millions of people and billions of dollars.
I don't disagree with that whatsoever. What I was specifically referring to today with Pete is that they were saying he is unqualified because he has a past. Everybody
Gary
has
Peters
a past.
was saying because he hasn't actually run an organization, as Pete Hegseth himself acknowledged, with more than 100 people in it.
And I go back to there's most senators that never ran an organization either. But when you start talking specifically about what they were going after him today, they were going after him because they were saying that he was unqualified because of his past history. We all have a past. And here's what I tell people all the time. I've been blessed to be successful in business moderately or in a large way, depends on which way you define it. And I've never fired anybody, Caitlin, for making a mistake. I have fired people for not admitting they made a mistake. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to admit it the first time, but once they finally admit they made a mistake, you can move on and people can grow from there. Pete is able to grow and he's going to be successful in what he's doing because he's able to admit that he's had a past and he's able to move past it and say, look, I am a changed man. He's proven he's a changed man. He's been very successful in his life, and now he's going to be successful in being Secretary of Defense.
Perhaps that's what's needed right now, a degree of patience and an eye to look out for what this nomination does. Pete Hegseth will ultimately be channeling Donald Trump's broader policy on foreign affairs and defense, which is at least something that puts him into context. But let me know in the comments if you agree, because these are questions that have already started to answer themselves in the first few weeks of the Trump presidency.